While your bread or your dough is rising in the oven, this is what you're going to want to do. You're going to want to put your chocolate chips or chunks or shavings into a larger bowl. You are going to want to add in your tablespoon of butter and half and half, or milk if that's what you're using. I like half and half, it's a little bit richer. Milk is fine. Don't add water. Water is the nemesis of chocolate. So I'm going to put this in the microwave probably for about 30 seconds at a time. In between, I'm going to stir until it is all nice and melty, and then I'm going to add the walnuts to it. You'll notice once it gets hot, you'll take it out of the microwave and it will look like it's still all the individual pieces. But once you start stirring it, it quickly melts and starts forming a cohesive, more of a sauce or ganache kind of consistency. And I could see I still have, I was hoping I could just get away with it. So what I normally do is I let it run for about 30 seconds my first time in, and sometimes that does it. Chocolate burns really easily, so you want to make sure not to do it too much. And keep stirring, because sometimes it's all you need, but sometimes you'll still have those chunks of chocolate chips in there, and I do. At which point then I'll just go in and do it maybe 15 seconds at a time, just because you really don't want it to get too hot. So keep stirring. You know what I did forget to tell you is before I came over here to melt the chocolate is I took my chopped up nuts to the stove and I toasted them a little bit. So these are nice toasted nuts. You're going to want to do that if you're using, no matter what kind of nuts you're using, you're going to want to toast them. It just brings out a more robust and nutty flavor from them. And it's really easy to do. You just put them on a dry pan on the stove over medium heat, and you gently toss them around. You might let it sit for a count of 10 to 20 seconds, depending on how quickly you're counting, and then just continue to toss it, because nuts are really high in oil, so they can burn really quickly. And for me, generally, the sign that I'm done is they'll have turned a little bit of a darker color, and you'll also start noticing an aroma coming off of them, which you don't really get when they're untoasted, right? So if all of a sudden you're like, ooh, it smells kind of walnutty or almondy or whatever nuts you happen to be using, that's when you know, oh, those are done, and you take them off. And always put them in a different container right off. Put them into a bowl, or maybe into, on a flat baking sheet or something, because you want that heat to go away. You don't want them to, they can kind of keep cooking themselves, and you don't want them to taste overdone or burnt. All right, so here's the deal. What I'm noticing now is now that I've put the nuts in, you can see this seems like a really thick mixture. And I do want to thin this out just ever so slightly, because I want to be able to spread this on the dough without it tearing and without a lot of difficulty. I don't want it to be a liquidy consistency, but I want to just loosen this up a little bit. And I've done this before and this recipe was totally fine, and this time it's a little bit stiffer, so maybe I'm using a different brand of chocolate. I don't know what the other variables could be, but this time I just need it. Maybe it's just drier in here today. So I'm going to put a little splash of half and half in here. I mean, you could be really careful and measure this, but I'm just putting this a little bit at a time, maybe like a teaspoon. And that seems to have done it. So now I can tell by looking at it, it's just loose enough. I'll be able to spread it. You see what's going on here? It's definitely not a liquid, but it's looking like I can easily move it around, and that's what you're looking for. All right, now we're going to get that dough out of the oven and start forming the beautiful loaf. I just pulled this out of the oven. It feels a little bit warm. My damp towel is still slightly damp, which is good. You want to keep that humidity in there. And let's see what has happened in here. Okay, it's looking good. Remember the size of the ball I put in there? It was maybe like this. And this is what it looks like now. So it has grown, but not too much. Okay, so what we're gonna do is turn this out onto a work surface. Oh, by the way, when I was talking about equipment we need, definitely need one of these, and I forgot to mention it. So this is the time, go get one. There's all kinds of different rolling pins. You could use whatever works for you. Okay, so first thing we're going to do, we're gonna put a little more flour here on our work surface because we don't want this to stick. And we're going to just dump it right out. Oops. Part of it stuck to the bowl a little bit, but that's okay. Easy enough to get out. Because we oiled and buttered that bowl, you could see it's no trouble getting everything out of there. Okay, so what we're going to do now is start forming this bread. We just knock it down a little bit, and what we're going to do is divide it into 3 sections. You want these to be pretty even pieces. If you want to be meticulous and weigh it, you certainly can do that. I'm just going to eyeball it, and hopefully I'll be pretty close. And we'll see soon enough. Okay, so I've got these 3 pieces. I'm going to start rolling them out. You just want enough flour here on your surface so it doesn't stick. And basically we want this to be a rectangular shape. And we want it to be about twice as long as it is wide. And you could flip it from side to side too. Ideally, what we're looking for is roughly a 6-inch by 12-inch rectangle. Could be a little bit bigger because sometimes the dough does want to shrink back up, but you don't want to make it much smaller than that because you want to have a lot of surface room for the yummy chocolatey filling that you're going to put on there. A little piece of walnut stuck in there, which probably won't hurt anything, but it doesn't look real pretty as I'm working on it to have a speck of something in there. Okay. So here you see what I've done. Hopefully you can see that. But this is what we're doing. We're going to roll out 3 pieces, try to get them all to be about the same size, and then we're going to start with the assembly. Okay, piece number 2. Same deal. You know, the more you get it into a rectangular shape to begin with, the easier it is to keep it in a rectangular shape as you're working with it. So if you start with a circle and you want it to be a rectangle, it's going to be more difficult than if you start with a rectangle and you want it to be a rectangle. I mean, obviously this is dough, right? So it's not going to be 100% perfect, but you can definitely get it pretty close to where you want it to be. And as you're doing it, I mean, normally I don't roll side to side like this, but I'm trying to not move it around too much. and do it from a seated position, which is also a little bit weird for me. Okay, that's 2. You could see here, I'm just checking them side by side to make sure they're roughly the same size, maybe stretching out those corners a little bit to make it more of a rectangle and less of a long oval. Okay, but if they're a little bit tight in there, that's okay. And this one, hopefully you guys can really see what I'm doing. So I'm just kind of pouncing it into a rectangle shape. Okay, and then I roll it this way. Maybe a little more flour here. Then I flip it this way to get the length. So you want to make sure to roll it in both directions because you want to create the correct length as well as the correct width. And if you see that one side is a lot thicker than the other, you could just kind of with your hands scooch some of that dough over. And then you're rolling it back into shape anyway. So it'll work for you. Let's see how close these are in shape and size. This one can be a little longer. And the nice thing about dough is you can kind of just stretch it too, right? 1, 2, 3. All pretty similar. They don't have to be exact, but this is what you're going for. 1, 2, 3. This is how they should look. Pretty similar in size and shape. This is where the good stuff starts happening. So you're going to take 1/3 of your mixture, of your chocolate mixture, and you're going to spread it on each of these 3 pieces of dough that you've rolled out. And you're going to try to fill pretty much the whole thing, but you're going to leave one of the long edges clear for about 1 inch. So you'll have a spot where that dough overlaps. So I'm putting, and this should not be really hot at this point. If this is still feeling hot to you, you don't want to put it on your dough because remember you have a lot of butter in there. And that butter will melt and it'll come to the surface. And that means it won't be in your finished bread. It'll just kind of be floating around on top. And if you want butter on top, you can always add it afterwards. And that would be incredibly decadent. So you just want to split this fairly evenly about 3 ways. Okay, and just with your spoon or a spatula, spread this out as evenly as you can over the surface. It might take you a minute to kind of get the gist of working with this. I like to spread basically from the center and take it outward. So you'll notice I put this chocolate in the center of each of these strips. And it's because I don't want to change the shape of it. So if I'm pulling from the outside towards the inside, it could alter the shape of what I've rolled out. But if I'm pulling from the inside to the outside, then I'm not going to squash it any place. Here we go. Do you see how this is looking? Yeah. So now I have my sheet pan ready with the parchment paper. And I'm just going to put that here to the side so it's ready when I need it. And I'm going to start rolling up these 3 strips into logs. So I start along one of these long edges, the side that has the chocolate closer to the edge. I'm going to start rolling it up. And you're going to want to do like a nice roll. You want to get it fairly tight. And you can even feel free to kind of stretch it as you do this. You know, kind of pick it up and pull it over the top. Because you don't want to squish the chocolate through it and have it come out the other side. You want it all to be trapped inside. So I pick it up and kind of roll it over. Pick it up and roll it over. Pick it up and roll it over. And when you get to the edge here, to the end, you're just going to want to take this dough and pinch, 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 pinch it together all the way down that seam to close it up and keep all that chocolate inside. You could also just squeeze those ends shut too, so that the chocolate has no escape. Okay, one down. We're going to put that seam side down on our parchment. Next one. Move this up a little bit so you can see it. Start rolling and lift and lift and put over, lift and put over. There we go. And if this is another reason you don't want those walnuts too big. If they're too big, they could start poking through your dough here, and you don't really want to do that. You want to maintain a nice swirl effect on the inside. And we're pinching these closed. And pinch the ends as well. And sometimes you'll see, oh, I didn't pinch enough. Got to go back and be a little more aggressive. Just do it. Squish it. I try not to pinch more than I need to because I don't want to have a real doughy area. I want to have as much of that swirl as I can. But that's looking pretty good. And then last one. Fold this over and lift and keep folding. Lift and keep rolling. And pinch all the way down. Just to keep that roll nice and tight so it doesn't start unraveling, so none of the chocolate comes out. This is because you're still going to be working with it. This is not the end, right? So you don't want things to start coming apart on you. Okay, and now the braid. Oops. Okay. Now we are going to start braiding this together. Let me just show you a close-up of what I did here. Here's the side where I pinched the entire seam together, and then I just flattened it out, and the ends are pinched together also. You're going to want to put those sides facing down. So at the far end, you will take your 3 pieces, give them a good squeeze. They are now becoming one. Give them a good squeeze and kind of fold them underneath. Okay, then we're going to start the braid. If you have not braided before, this is really easy. All this means is you're taking the side pieces and folding them over the center piece. So we'll start with this side. We'll fold that over the center and we'll move this one over. And now this one's the center. So we'll fold this side over the center. And you just keep switching sides like that. And I like to keep shifting it off center like this so that it's easier to fold over the side and you don't get any weird twists or angles. You just get a nice, smooth, back and forth braid. all the time you're keeping that seam side facing down. And then when we get to the bottom here, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to squeeze these ends all together and just give them a little tuck under like that. I probably should have started this lower on the parchment paper, but I'm going to try to center it now. And now this beauty is going to get covered up with the plastic wrap again and put back into the warm oven for another hour to rise one more time. And then after that, we're going to get it ready to put in the oven and bake it.